Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 128. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very, very special guest in the best state, that is New Jersey, Julia Ashley. Julia, what's going on?
Hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm great. I've been looking forward to this for a while and can't wait to dive into your story and share some cool stuff with the audience. So, we'll jump right in, but if you had to introduce yourself to somebody who's listening to this podcast and has no idea who you are, like who's this girl with two first names, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I guess I'm Julia Ashley. I'm from New Jersey and I'm this pro soccer player who's just recently, kind of as we speak, actually deciding to retire. So that's just kind of been my whole life. I've been playing sports my whole life. But now I'm moving on to this new chapter and kind of figuring out what's next. So, yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot to unpack. And since you mentioned soccer right from the start, maybe that's the best place for us to start. Where did soccer begin for you? How old were you when you started playing?
I started playing when I was like 6 or 7. So been playing my whole life. W- I had like a different path, I would say, with soccer than a lot of kids nowadays. And even when I was playing, I played for the same team my entire life from when I was 7 to 18. We like started out as a town team in Montclair, New Jersey, and then we kind of just built up from there. So we gained just a lot of people coming in from like different states. I had an amazing coach who just brought in new players, and we became one of the best teams in the nation. And we started out as like a small town team. So really, really cool environment that I like grew up in.
Now, did you always want to be a professional soccer player from that age of 6 or 7?
Um, honestly, when I've like looked back at just like yearbooks and whatnot, I think I wanted to be a pro basketball player when I was a little bit younger. So I played soccer, basketball, and lacrosse growing up. But around I think middle school was when I like that was the time where I knew like this is what I want to do and this is the path of like where I'm going to go. And from there, yeah, like that was pretty much what I was having that like internal conversation with myself all the time of like this is definitely my path. Um yeah.
Was there a specific moment when you realized that your dream of playing a professional sport was going to come true? And did that moment come before you actually signed with a team?
Yeah, so I was lucky to have a great recruiting process in high school, and I ended up going to the University of North Carolina. And basically, like my track before going to school was I was on like a 3.5 year program as opposed to 4, which is like doing that intentionally so I would graduate early and go to the draft. And so I think like having a plan like that, like I never deterred from there. Like I knew that was what I was going to do. But my senior year at UNC, my team had like an amazing year. We did really well, and I did very well individually. And so I feel like probably during the like NCAA tournament, we ended up going all the way to the finals. We actually lost, but like during that time, I did know like that was what was going to happen for me. But I guess in that moment, like I really do focus on like small goals. So I think I was more focused on the time of like us just winning. I wasn't even thinking about kind of what's next, if that makes sense. But yeah,
It does make sense. And so obviously this conversation about soccer has been so surface level to start. And
yeah,
I'd love to go a little bit deeper, but on the surface level, it sounds like okay, started playing soccer at a young age, team was good, team kept getting better, opportunities arose, went to a great college, had a great team, good experience. I'm imagining that there were hard parts, many hard parts in this process, and if you
mhm,
look back at your entire life so far in soccer and outside of soccer, what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you did not get to choose for yourself?
yeah. So I definitely dealt with a lot of injury throughout my entire career. Probably starting in high school. But the biggest injury that I ever faced was in 2020. I was playing in Australia. So that was the second pro team that I was on in Adelaide, which is Southern Australia. And I got into a rough tackle and I herniated L4, L5, S1 in my back. Um, and in that moment, it like felt like a crunch in my back and did not feel good at all. But I think no one knew like the severity of the situation until a few days later when I was bedridden. I couldn't find a single like comfortable position for about like 2 days. I like the most pain I've ever been in my like entire life. Yeah, and unfortunately at the time it was also like National Australia Day. So I wasn't able to like get into the hospital. I had to have a doctor come and like give me medicine just to hold me off. Um, and then I ended up going to the hospital. I got an emergency CT guided cortisone injection, which immediately gave me relief. But I'd already, like a lot of damage had already been done. So, and I didn't even like really notice at the time because I was just in pain everywhere. But my right foot wasn't lifting, like on my own. I was having to like use my hip flexor and completely just like lift it up myself, as opposed to just naturally using like the muscles in your anterior tib, like all that. So I had drop foot. And that went on from January of 2020 all the way until October. So yeah, like just from the start there, it was so incredibly painful. But I had no idea kind of what my life was going to look like after that, let alone like what my career was going to look like. But ultimately, I ended up seeing like a neurologist there who just stuck pins and needles kind of in my calf and down low, and I responded well. I could feel it. So they were just like, we're not going to do anything invasive. We're not going to get surgery. So which was like very promising. And from there, I just did a lot of physical therapy. So I was in Australia at the time. I ended up coming back to the US and I had been traded to a team in Seattle. So this is COVID. COVID had just hit, like right around the time I got hurt. And then when I was in Seattle, I just got there. A lot of new staff was on the team. Honestly, we weren't properly staffed in order to treat me. So I ended up going to North Carolina, like which is where I had a lot of my good resources, and I did physical therapy there. But again, like the back stuff is so tough, and everybody's body is different, right? Every injury is so different. So I think a lot of PTs were looking at me in terms of like, all right, let's strengthen everything, but we didn't know like where the root of the problem was lying. So it came to around like June, July of that year, and it's like, all right, we need to get running. Like I haven't run in 6 months. I feel strong, but my foot is just still like flopping. If you walked next to me, you would just hear it like, yeah. So I ended up going back to Seattle in August. My team had been in, where were they? They were in Utah for like a Challenge Cup tournament. It's like a bubble tournament because of COVID. And it's August. I'm feeling pretty good, and we're getting to a point of like, all right, we need to run. So they put me in this running progression, which it wasn't much of a progression. It was kind of like just go, and I strained my calf, and it makes sense because like things weren't firing properly. You didn't know what was going on. So September rolled around, and I was really lucky that the team had temporarily hired this guy named Casey Cordial. He is an amazing physical therapist. Like, I credit him so much, and I'm so grateful that he was just in my life. He was able to just help me so much. He worked with David Goggins. You probably like know that name. And I think he's like his personal PT. But basically, he looked at things just holistically, and he was seeing where my imbalances were. So we did a couple of different tests, and he was able to conclude that my glute wasn't firing, my glute medius. So from there, I would do an hour to like 75 minutes of activation before I did anything. And basically, I was just squeezing my butt like for 75 minutes before I could even touch a ball. And it was such a tedious process, right? Like, you hear about these top level athletes, like when you get to the highest level, and we've been playing for so long, you have to do so much maintenance work, right? But this was crazy. Like, for me to even just touch a ball, I had to do the extra. But it wasn't even the thought for me at the time. It's like, this is what I need to do in order to get where I need to go. And it was tedious, but it ended up working. So I did that for about another like month to month and a half. And then from there, like, my foot was lifting, like everything was connecting again. And at that point, I would say like in October, that was the fittest I've felt in like such a long time. And I just felt so healthy. Like, everything was working, and that neuromuscular connection was happening again. And it was such a relief. And yeah, so then from there, I was like good to go, and I ended up getting picked up in an expansion draft. So I was on that team, and actually didn't end up getting to play for them because of that whole injury. And then I ended up going to Louisville, which was the new team in the league. But yeah, it was such a crazy year. And because of that injury, I've dealt with so much since then. Like, even though I'd felt the best I had felt in so long, there was just so many small like things that have popped up since. I don't have muscle in my anterior tib. Like, it's almost flat there. Like, if you look at my bone, my shin bone, you can just see it. And I've had like Achilles tears there since then. I've had other things. So when you go through such a crazy injury like that, things pop up. But truly, like, I think just taking things day by day and really advocating for myself and listening to myself. A lot of the people that I was surrounded by, and like the staff, you're told to do things, right? But I had to like speak up and be like, no, like, I can't do this right now. Like, I'm not ready for this. And that takes a lot. That took a lot like from me, because I hate ever like having to say like, oh, I can't do, like, or you know what, maybe this isn't right. Like, I want to do what's best. I want to play. Like, I just want to play. But when things aren't working right, you have to figure out like, okay, I need to advocate for myself. So that was something really big that I learned out of that. And yeah, it was. I haven't talked about this. Like, I posted something about it on Instagram when it happened, like after I had recovered, but I haven't fully talked about it. And I think it's not really common in soccer for this to happen. I think it's a lot of football players. So yeah, definitely crazy. But I'm really grateful that I can still move, and still move at like a pretty high level. It's just a lot of it was mentality and being able to just push through. Yeah,
So, as a physical therapist by trade, all of that makes perfect sense. And I'll also
yeah,
just say that everything you went through is not an uncommon experience in the fact that it's not an exact science when you don't know 100% what's happening inside the body. And there's this puzzle component to figuring out what's going on. And part of that is the healthcare professional, it is the training staff, it is the people who are helping you. And like you said, it's also you. And advocating for ourselves, I think, is not an easy skill, or maybe
Yep.
it's not a natural skill because when we're in the presence of people who maybe know more or are trained in a different way, we want to let them take lead. But I'm so glad that you spoke up and that you learned that through the process. I'll also say that it sounds like slowing down and being forced to slow down through this injury allowed you to speed back up at a certain point and
Yeah,
maybe even taught you more about yourself than you could have learned otherwise.
absolutely. To that point there, I whole life is go, 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 right? I think I honestly was always like work harder, not smarter.
Mm.
And so I think that whole injury, and learning specifically from Casey, I was able to just kind of adjust in that way. And since then, like rest has been such an important thing. I know that doesn't necessarily like align with exactly everything we were talking about, but that is for me to continue to endure, to keep playing. Like I had to figure out and do things different from what other people are doing. All this activation, like getting my body ready. Everyone needs something different. And like you said, it's not exact. So, yeah.
So there's a great quote that I'll share here in a second from Steve Magnus that I think speaks to doing hard things in a different light, or at least a different one than most of us are used to thinking about. Because pushing through, working harder, enduring the process, a lot of that can feel almost cold and mechanical and one dimensional.
Hmm.
And this quote is really profound. And so I'll read it and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. But he says, real toughness is experiencing discomfort or distress, leaning in, paying attention, and creating space to take thoughtful action. It's maintaining a clear head to be able to make the appropriate decision. Toughness is navigating discomfort to make the best decision you can, and research shows that this model of toughness is more effective at getting results than the old one. So, in other words, toughness might not be always just pushing through. Maybe
Yeah,
sometimes the toughest thing we can do is taking a step back and saying, I need to slow down.
absolutely. I think like being an athlete from like such a young age, and I think all athletes and a lot of people can just attest this in general. Like it's always push through, like keep going. And I think what a big factor for me in that is like expectations of coaches and you wanting to and expectations of yourself, right? Like where you want to be. And so when you're hurt and when you're injured and people aren't always like no one understands like what you are actually going through and you're the only one who does. So you're the only one who can advocate for yourself. And ultimately if you let all these opinions kind of seep in and like so much easier said than done, right? Like for me, these coaches determine my playing time. I want to play. So you want to do whatever you can, but like you can't play if your foot's not lifting. So yeah, like I remember being back at UNC as well. A coach would kind of always just be like kind of skeptical of why I need to sit out and whatnot. And I'd like feel that pressure. But then I had another coach who was always like, no, like do what you need to do. And I had to because at the time, like my knee was just not holding up well. Um, so I think it's great to have people in your corner that like support you in that way. But ultimately, like you know your body. And even when you know your body, sometimes like you were there's just still so many other factors that go into it and you can't even make like a clear-headed decision for yourself. And I know that I've been fogged in that way like numerous times even after this injury, because I mean like for me I don't want to let my team down. I want to like do well for myself too. So yeah, like you said it is tougher to make those decisions sometimes. So yeah.
So, speaking of tough decisions, this transitions well into the next question that I'll ask, which is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever chosen to do on purpose? And why have you chosen to do that thing?
Yeah. Oh man, so I guess, like, I'm making this decision right now, and it started when I came back home, like, in March, April, but I'm deciding to retire from playing soccer. Oof, okay, sorry.
You don't have to apologize. It's okay.
Yeah, so I a lot of my close friends know, and, like, I haven't, like, announced this decision yet, but I've been in, like, the process of, like, moving on in terms of jobs, and just in a big, like, life transition, but yeah, I haven't formally made the decision yet, but, like, it's happening right now, and it is a choice, but I think ultimately, like, it's what I need to do and it's what's best for, like, my body and my mind. The past, like, couple years since, like, graduating and playing professionally, I haven't, like, gone through quite a few injuries, and since specifically the back, like, it's just every couple months something is wrong, and playing soccer is at a high level, it's just so taxing on your body, the different movements that we're making, like, all of the agility, it's so hard on my joints, and I've talked about my back, but I have a really bum left knee as well. And yeah, so when I was actually waived from my team in Houston in March and or February, March, and it was the first time in my life where I ended up coming home and I was like, I need a second right now, like, and I guess I've never given myself a second, nor have I wanted to take one, to be honest. What I mean by that is like I didn't want to train for performance for soccer, specific performance. And these past couple months, I've had quite a few like offers to go play different places. But like since March, I wasn't training. I started coaching for my old club. And I've been working out like a lot still. It's like so necessary for me and I absolutely love it. But because I've given my body a break, I feel so much better and I'm able to do things that like I wasn't able to do while I was playing soccer. Every time I was playing for the past couple years, I would do like all this work in the off season, right? To get healthy and even during season if I had been hurt mid season, which was happening quite often. Um and everything I was doing was like for me to go back on the field and like hurt myself again. Like I couldn't run on a treadmill. Like I don't even know why. Like I could only run on like a soft surface like the field. It would hurt my back, it would hurt my knee to do like just all these different things. But now I'm because I've taken this break, um, my body has responded really well and like a lot of strength training that I've been doing. And yeah, so like physically and mentally I'm in a lot better place in that sense. But yeah, this decision is it's so hard. Like my goals, like I guess I didn't meet them. Like, I wanted to play for the national team. I think that was definitely in like grasp for a period of time. I wanted to play probably till I was like 35, like when I had a family and kids. But ultimately, like it is the best decision. And I also know that like my worth isn't in soccer. Um, I can't say like I introduced myself in the beginning that I don't identify as like the soccer player because I really have been. But I know that, and just even from coaching recently, like I really can help impact in a lot of different ways through the experiences that I've had. And so I think that's a lot of what I've learned these past couple months in this transition time is I feel so much more like impactful and useful as opposed to when I was playing. I'm like hurt every couple months. I was on a team. I feel like more valuable of being like a great teammate as opposed to like just my performance. Um, yeah, so like now I've been giving back not only with my like soccer experience, but like I talked about earlier with my back, a lot of injury prevention and activation. That's what I work on primarily with all of the like individuals and small groups that I train as well as the teams. So it's like the first thing I do. We do band work. And yeah, so this is been a really tough time for me. But I also think like I know it's the right decision if I want to keep being active and so I don't have to get a knee replacement or back surgery in like a year or two. Um, yeah.
Well, first, thank you for sharing that. And you got a bit emotional in the beginning of that, which I appreciate. It's not the first time someone's cried on this
Yeah.
podcast. But for people who maybe haven't played sports at a high level or for a long time, could you explain why it's such an emotional decision for you?
Yeah. So like I just talked about a little bit with like identity and whatnot, like this is like every day I've woken up and it's soccer. Like there's no other thing that really matters. And it's so emotional because it's not going to be my everyday anymore. I'm moving on to taking on a different role and a new job. I'm still like going to coach and stay involved. I love the sport so much and but it's not going to be the same anymore. I love the grind of waking up and doing everything I can to like make myself better as a soccer player. And doing whatever I can to like help my team be better. And I guess that it's just such a different I'm going to be living such a different life now. And it's really sad to like close that chapter. Yeah, I think yeah, just talking about it and with you and making it makes it more real. Like again, I haven't announced it yet, but it's becoming real. So soccer has been everything for me and it's taught me so much. So I think in any time, regardless of if you're an athlete or not, whatever you've invested your whole life into and when you're going into a new phase it is tough and it's sad because if it's not then I feel like maybe you're not as passionate about it as you think. Yeah.
It sounds like, in a way, you're transitioning from the professional soccer player whose name was Julia to Julia who used to play professional soccer, and
Yes.
that is a tough transition.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. um I think so like right now I've been transitioning into like doing, I guess, like hybrid athlete type things. So, like DECA is something I recently competed in, and I was talking to my coach Sam the other day, and he brought it up and said in like this group chat, like we have other things going on in life, like we're not professional athletes, and I was like, wait a second, no, I am, but I guess I'm not. So yeah, I think like that time right now is going to be it's going to be tough. But I feel like I'll still always like have that fire in me in that way, and I'll continue to live my life in that respect, I guess, even if it's not like my title anymore. Yeah,
So on episode 67 of this podcast, Mike Zacco shared this thought that I think is really applicable to your situation and just to anybody. But it's this idea of identifying with characteristics, not things that we do.
yeah,
And so it sounds like you've always been a competitor. You've always been hardworking. You've always been driven. You've always been a good teammate. And those things can easily and smoothly transition to almost anything else in life. But it's that what are you doing? What is the vehicle that's changing? And that's hard. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So, with that being said, one more question on this before we move on. You mentioned that you're coming to terms with the fact that your worth is not in soccer, your worth is not in you being an athlete. How are you kind of forming where you find your worth? I mean, where do you feel like your worth comes from in this season? And I ask that because I know this is a topic that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. Um, so I think kind of what you just said in terms of like a lot of the characteristics and like the qualities that I think I have developed from soccer. But even without soccer, like I still have them. Um, and so I think like with my next steps in terms of like I'll be coaching, not as my full time job, but like seeing how I can like teach and show these young girls that I'm working with, like through what I've been through, like how they can take on these qualities and how they can use them day to day. So I feel like that gives me a lot of like purpose. I the past couple weeks, I just taken on like some less coaching. I feel like in the summer I was doing so much, and these past couple weeks it's just been a little bit less, just because of something that happened recently. But with with doing less, I feel like I was actually able to give more into each session, and I think yeah, like just kind of what we talked about a little bit earlier, like taking a step back. And going a little bit slower so you can give more and like put more effort into those sessions. So like physically and just mentally. Yeah.
Mm. And we've touched on this a couple times already, but sometimes it's about pacing ourselves and slowing down and making sure that we can continue moving for the period of time that we would like. And so that's part of this transition, it sounds like, is to ensure that your physical body and in a lot of ways, I'm sure your mind can continue at a sustainable pace forward the way that you would like them. I'm curious for you, Julia, when you hear the word endurance, what does that mean to you? What comes to mind?
Yeah. I think endurance is one's like capacity or capability to be able to just like withstand tough times, like faces in like times of adversity or struggle. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like what endurance is. I know like this is like a quote that is used like so often. Like, life is a marathon, not a sprint, right? When I think of sprinters, and we learned this like growing up about speed and pace, right? You can only be so fast and so quick. I think quickness comes genetically, right? Like you get blessed by two quick parents or just the genetic makeup, right? And but you can grow a little bit, right? You can get a second or two faster. But with running a marathon is where I would like place in endurance. And endurance again, like there is the element of like genetic makeup, but I think endurance is something that is so learned, right? We can how much more can we push through? How much more can we figure out like what capacity we can figure out like what is our capacity.
Mm,
When you start feeling just in the sports aspect, right, when you feel that like physical pain, like that's just like the start, right? Like how much further can we go? And I think for me, like on an individual level, I would say I have pretty good endurance physically, and I think a lot of my teammates would always kind of like soccer is an endurance sport, but they'd be like how can you run so long, and I think so much of that for me has always been like mental. It's always been mental. And yeah, so I think that's something that can continue to just grow. Like, how much are you willing to truly endure?
mm. I love that definition, and I couldn't help but imagine a soccer match. And you look at the people on the field, and everybody's got some kind of movement. And depending on the position, Some people are moving more than others, and at different points, certain people are moving while others are not, all in different directions, right? There's a lot going on. And for someone who doesn't know soccer very well, like myself, sometimes it can seem like the people who are not moving are really not doing a lot.
Oh yeah.
However, I would imagine though that one, there's a lot of strategic rest that happens on the soccer field. And so to parallel that to life, it's okay to take some strategic rest before you continue moving in the direction you need to go. And also it's not always forward motion. I mean, you're all over the place on a soccer field, and life in a lot of ways is the same.
Absolutely. I think a couple weeks ago, like I was on ESPN showing a clip of Messi playing for Miami, and all the players are just running around him, right? And he is almost stood in the same spot like the entire time, but he found and figured out like his moment when to go. And yeah, like you nailed it right on the head. Like that's what soccer is. It's stop and go.
Mm.
It's figuring out the time to take that risk, or when to like slow down. And I think a lot of the best players, like you said, depending on the position, they move less during the games so that
Mm.
they can have that gas in them at like the 95th plus minute, right? So yeah, really good point.
And it's so interesting, and this is me speaking from personal experience playing sport, and I played a lot of football. When you're young or you're new or you're extra hungry, I think it's easy to look at someone like Messi or someone who's more experienced and think to yourself, "Oh, they're not moving, they're not trying
Yeah.
hard.
Yes.
I'm gonna outwork this person."
Yep.
And then as you gain more experience, and the same goes for life, as you get older, as you gain more experience and wisdom, you realize that there's a lot of strategy behind that, and maybe you start to adopt it yourself.
Absolutely. And that definitely comes with time and just seeing for yourself. Because again, like we touched on before, right? Like work hard, work hard, work hard. Like that's going to get you where you want to go. But for a sport like soccer, which is obviously like you need the athletic makeup, but there is a lot of tactics that go into it. And how can you find yourself being in the right place at the right time in order to get it done?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
Uh, so this podcast goes out to everybody across the world. There are people listening who are feeling really good right now. There are people listening who are going through a really tough time, and everywhere in between. And this is my favorite question. This is the last wrap up question of the podcast. But if somebody out there is listening and you're in their ears right now, and they're going through such a dark season, and maybe it's a season of transition and they just don't know where to go or what to do, what would you say to them to encourage them and give them a little bit of guidance?
Yeah. When I think about like the toughest times that I've had, you are just you're so like in your moment, right? Like you're thinking like this is all, this is it, like this is kind of the end. Or maybe just like my whole world is crashing down. So I think like I was able to find strength, knowing that like it's temporary, like it's not forever. It's you're feeling all of this pain, this struggle right now, but like you're not alone as well. Even though like your situation might be very specific to you, if you can like lean on the people around you. Um, like I recently faced something super tough. And I know we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, but my dog, who's just 2 years old, just passed away, like just tragically out of nowhere. And I had people in my life that like I didn't think maybe would step up for me, and I really haven't needed. I like to pride myself on like being independent and not having to lean on others. Um, and I was just felt so supported, by like the people around me who knew like how much. I mean, he was my best friend. Like I leaned on him so much, and these people in my life were able to really step up for me. So I think like if you can, and I hope people do who are going through tough times, like lean on people around you, because it really is temporary and it's going to get better. So just kind of like thinking like you aren't alone. Like everyone has something going on. So I think that's what I would say.
That's really, really great guidance and encouragement. And I'm so sorry about your loss.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Do
Sorry, I
you
didn't
mind?
mean to like bring that down.
No, that's what this podcast is about, right? This is life. And
Yeah,
even still after sharing that, you've got, a smile on your face, you're
yeah,
upbeat, you're encouraged and encouraging. And I wouldn't have known that. The audience wouldn't have known that if you didn't share it. And I think it's just important to know that behind the scenes, you talked about the hardest thing that you've ever decided to do. And on top of that, in the same exact season, you're faced with what seems like maybe the second hardest thing you've ever
yeah.
had to handle, if I had to guess.
I was I honestly, like, I wasn't sure which one was the hardest, like, it was hard for me to, like, answer that question at first because truly, like, it it really has been one of those it rains, it pours type of seasons, but yeah, like, and again, like, things do get better with time, and I'm, like, happy to know, and I hope, like, my dog wasn't in pain when it happened, and that, like, gives me some just like, gives me a breath, like, able to just kinda take a second, but yeah, it all happens at once, and so just need to lean on the people around you and just keep pushing, keep enduring, right?
And just, to put your words in different words, it when it rains, it pours, and you can't have flowers without the rain. And so there will be some good that will come out of this, and it might just take some time to blossom. You know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
W with that being said, Julia, if people want to follow along with this next chapter of your story, if people want to reach out and thank you for this conversation or just connect with you, where should they do that?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach out to me on Instagram. Do you want me to give you my handle?
Yeah,
Y
throw it out there.
yeah, so it's Julia Ashley with 1 A. So JuliaShley.
Nice. I like it. And I'll link that down in the description so it's easy to find. And Julia, thank you again for this. And I know we spoke about this on the phone, but when I'm back up in New Jersey, I'd love to grab a workout and
Yeah,
hopefully I can keep up. We'll see.
no, definitely can. I would love that. Sounds great.
Cool. Me too. Well, thank you again for this.
Okay, sounds good.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.